Again, I'm not trying to
What do you mean, why it was built?
Yeah, why did they build? Why would the temple?
What I know was built for a reason to worship God or
anything more?
Not really.
Okay, because in the Torah we have the history. Because I'm very interested in history.
Okay.
Because I'm a Catholic, and my Protestant brothers and sisters maybe. The history of the church isn't that important because they ascribe the same qualities to the New Testament as you do the Quran, as in it's the verbatim word of God. Okay. But I don't follow that. I try and follow the historical thing. So the Torah, it goes from Genesis through to Deuteronomy. There are 5 books. Yes. And in those 5 books, you have things that God said, things that God did, and a history of the Jewish people all rolled into one. It's a story. You can follow the story.
It was an Israelite.
Yeah. So what you have, and these are verses from the Old Testament. You tell me to stop whenever you want. When the Jews left the captivity of Egypt, they went into the desert, and this is the word from Exodus. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way. So God's presence, spiritual presence, was in the pillar of cloud. This won't take too many seconds.
No problem.
Yeah? Okay. And then it builds, and then God appeared in the clouds on Mount Sinai and gave the law to Moses. And it says here, the glory of God rested on Mount Sinai and the cloud covered it, and he called to Moses from the cloud. So you can see that God, because anyone who sees God dies. So God is concealed in a cloud, in the pillar of fire and the pillar of blood, and then in the cloud there. And then God said in Exodus, let them make me a sanctuary. Now, do you know what this is?
Yeah.
Right, this is the...
About the Moses one is wrong.
This is the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, Ark of the Covenant, that's correct.
And God in Exodus says, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. God has been with Israel. He's told them, commanded them to build this box. And this box was in the tabernacle, in the tent. The Jewish nation used to camp on the way to the promised land.
Yeah.
Okay? And then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of God filled the tabernacle. So what you have, the presence of God, here, he commanded this, and then he filled the box. And here he said, God says, I will abide among the Israelites. I will be their God. So what you've got the abiding presence of God in the history of the Jews. There's only 2 more pages, just bear with me. And then this, in the promised land, became the Temple of Solomon.
Yeah.
And in the Temple of Solomon, this was placed here.
Okay.
And this is the, I will establish my abode in your midst. I will establish my home in your midst. I will not spurn you. I will be ever present in your midst. So you've got God telling the people that he will be with them. And I've got lots of other verses here.
But you don't believe God will be with them, actually, like, because in the Quran, like, for example, Allah mentioned in the Quran about Prophet Mohammed and his companion Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. When he said to him, don't be afraid, Allah is with us.
Yes.
But with us here doesn't mean Allah is with them by aiding them.
Sure.
By protecting them, you know? Because as we know in the Bible, Jacob said, oh God, my temple cannot contain you. Let the heavens and the earth to do so, you know? Yeah. So what I want Israel to do, because you choose to talk about Jesus, you said that Jesus...
And we'll get to Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus
so
is really important.
what you have to understand, as a Muslim, look, we cannot really just take what is in the Old Testament or the Torah face value, just take it like that. No, we have to question it. Where I'm going to question it.
Yeah, please do.
The 5 books of Moses supposed to be given to who? To Moses.
Yeah.
God gave the 5 books to Moses.
Apart from the ending when he died.
Okay.
Which I think was written by Joshua.
No one knows, to be honest. No one knows. Not just that one, even there's many. As one of the Jewish rabbi from Spain mentioned, he said there's a few passages in the 5 books which cannot be explained. Okay? So what I would say to you also, the earliest manuscript we have for the Old Testament is 1,000 years, especially the 5 books, 1,000 years after Moses. Also, Moses never spoke Greek. Okay? So I want to know what Moses really said, not what has been translated about Moses.
Sure.
You understand? Like, you know, people can say, for example, Allah sent the Quran So Prophet Muhammad mentioned Allah is with us. Allah mentioned in the Quran that Allah is with us, or Allah is with you as well. There's many verses that in Allah ma'al muttaqin, Allah is with the pious ones.
But that doesn't mean He's actually manifest spiritually.
So now, someone who doesn't understand the Arabic language in its pure form, and did not understand the meaning of the Quran and how the Prophet Muhammad himself understood it, can easily mistranslate it by saying Allah is with them. And you think, either is physically, as I explained, I'm using it for the sake of explaining. I don't believe Allah has a body as people like against us. We believe Allah has essence and attributes without any doubt and names. So now we can go back to the Arabic text and say, no, that doesn't mean that. But now you have to tell me what really Moses said. I don't want to tell me what people translated about Moses.
Okay, my response to that would be, that we physically accept there was something called the Temple of Solomon. We also accept there was something called the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with the Torah, because there are the story and the history of the Jews coupled with the presence of God, they can't be picked out as isolated verses because they're continuous throughout. Well, perhaps. I don't know. Why would it be racist?
Well, you said in the presence of God and you said with the Jews, so what are the Jews not entitled to have a God? Everyone's God is the same.
I think I agree with you, probably.
We just said it to the opposite. So.
Maybe not quite.
No, it's misunderstanding.
So let's say, without any historical evidence to back what I'm saying, I can see where you're coming from, because I could say tonight, I'll be with you in prayer. That doesn't mean I'm actually with you and all of those things. But what we have here in these verses that have always been accepted by the Jews as accurate and as the inspired word of God is, not only does God speak in geographical areas, from geographical places to particular people, He also commands things that we agree were built. So we've got tied in with all of this. The purpose for the temple was for the worship of the presence of God on the Day of Atonement, where...
But our respect,
Shall I put these away? You would like to.
The question I'm asking, how can you be so sure what really Moses said? Let me ask you, what language Moses spoke?
Moses probably spoke Hebrew.
Hebrew didn't exist Moses' time.
Okay, what did
Hebrew came after, it was invented after Hebrew. Hebrew means Abir.
Right.
Ibrani. Okay. Hebrew means traveler. That's what it means. It was not a language. That's true. It was like a cow and all of these symbols. Yeah. So now I want you to understand. Moses, it was where? In Egypt. Okay. And the Israelites, they were enslaved by Pharaoh, the tyrant, for many centuries.
And we get that from the Torah.
From the Quran as well. Allah mentioned the Quran. So what I'm saying is a logical argument. Now I'm saying you keep telling me Moses said this and God said that, but you are using a language which Moses never spoke about before. So I want you to tell me, how do you know Moses said that?
How do I know Moses? How do I know Moses said that?
Because you are using translation.
Right.
The earliest manuscript for the Old Testament, especially the 5 books, is 1,000 years after Moses. Basically, someone came 1,000 years after Moses, and he said, Moses said this, Moses did this, and God said this, and God said that. But the question we ask ourselves, wait a minute, there's 1,000 year gap.
Sure.
Not 1 year gap, 2 years, there's 1,000 year gap. Also, you are trusting a language which Moses never spoke about. So how can we be so sure? How can we trace back what really Moses said? And how can we know those who translate Moses' speech were trustworthy, honest, and truthful?
Okay, good point. My response to that would be that the Torah that I hold to be the book of the Jews, there's no record of it ever being a debatable proposition. The Jews, in all of their writings in the Talmud and throughout every bit of evidence you can get, never ever claimed it to be anything other than the Word of God. Now, if it isn't, then the onus is on the person who makes that claim to bring me the one that was in existence, or give me a reason why it's no longer in existence.
No, that's cool.
But most importantly, Shamsi, I'll just finish off because I want you to speak a lot more than me. I do. But the thing for me is, we have the historical evidence that the Temple of Solomon was actually in existence, and the Qibla of the Jews was always towards Jerusalem.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah. So in this it says, the Talmud states that a Jew praying in the diaspora shall direct himself towards the land of Israel, in Israel towards Jerusalem, and towards Jerusalem towards the temple, and the temple towards the Holy of Holies. Now the Holy of Holies is where the Ark of the Covenant is. So the whole Jewish alignment of their prayer, which would be similar to the Muslim prayer, was towards the temple, and the temple towards the Holy of Holies. The reason it was towards the Holy of Holies, because in the Holy of Holies, the term the Hebrew Bible refers to the inner sanctuary of the tabernacle where God dwelt. Now this is archaeological, historical evidence that ties in with those verses that I gave you. On their own, I agree with you.
Again, Solomon, the story of Solomon, without any doubt, is not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses.
The story of Solomon,
Yeah,
the building of Solomon's temple. And
it's not. It's mentioned after in the Old Testament, yes. But the 5 book of Moses was given to Moses, which Solomon was not even around. He wasn't even born yet. Solomon basically the story that I'm focusing on the 5 books of Moses.
Sure.
The 5 books of Moses. You keep saying Moses said this, said that.
Yeah.
Even the Old Testament, you are conflicted between 2.
Sure.
I'm not saying everything in the Old Testament.
You a lot, Sham.
Thank you very much. I'm not saying everything in the Old Testament is not true.
Okay.
Likewise, I'm not saying everything in the Old Testament it is true. No, I'm saying yes, some truth there. For example, the temple of Solomon, without any doubt.
Okay.
But I'm saying you cannot really stand here, out of respect, saying
please do.
that I'm so sure Moses said this and that.
Yeah.
Moses did this and that. Because why? As I've mentioned, the 5 books that we have supposedly to be revealed to Moses came 1,000 years after Moses in a language which Moses never spoke of.
Are you talking about the copies that we can verify?
Yeah, like the earliest manuscript is the Dead Sea Scroll.
Right.
Yeah. So that is 1,000.
From what I understand, Jewish tradition says that Moses received the tablets of stone, but also the oral Torah.
That's true. That's
and over a period of 40 years, he relayed it, and then it was copied down.
Yeah.
And the copy that I have, and these verses come from, even though you accurately say we haven't, the earliest would be the Septuagint, presumably it's the earliest copy, 300 BC. So as you said, it's about 1,000 years or
1,000 years after Moses. Yeah.
Okay.
After 1,000 years, yeah.
They are still the earliest evidences we have to analyse what was given to Moses. Now, you're right, it could have happened, but unless you can show me that it did happen, that's a proposition with no evidence.
No, listen to this, yeah? Listen to this. Imagine I tell you, for example, Prophet Muhammad. Imagine I said to you, Prophet Muhammad said this. Prophet Muhammad said that. Any Muslim here will ask me, Shamsi, are you saying Prophet Muhammad said that because you read it in a book which is from the companion of Prophet Muhammad, or you saying you heard Prophet Muhammad saying it? Because the gap between you and the Prophet Muhammad is really more than 1,000 years.
Okay.
So how do you get that from Prophet Muhammad?
Right.
Where do you get that information from?
Yeah.
So I'm saying the scribes who wrote down the earliest manuscript, which the Bible based upon, came 1,000 years after Moses. The actual guy came 1,000 years after Moses.
Okay.
So he's writing something about Moses in a language which Moses never spoke of.
Okay.
And in a big gap.
How do we know Moses never spoke of that language if no one was there and it was 1,000 years before it was recorded?
That's a good question, because the earliest manuscript is in the Greek language, and Moses who lived in Egypt 1,000 years before.
How do we know he didn't speak?
But there was no Greek.
How do we know?
Because
But how do we know?
Because we can trace how the Egyptians spoke, what language spoke. You can go to Egypt and check the language. Yeah, they had their own language. They never had Greek. The Greek went to Egypt. It just no longer go before Jesus came to existence.
Well, actually,
no way before Moses' time.
It's very interesting. The history of the Greeks' influence in Egypt is huge because
it happened after Moses.
300 years before the Septuagint, the Greeks ruled Egypt. They ruled the Middle East, and their culture and their language became the lingua franca. And by lingua franca, it became the written language of the intelligence. intelligence. And because it's an ancient language, not a common language which changes, that's the reason it was written like some things are written in Latin, because they don't get changed.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to grasp what you're saying.
But I'm saying that it's still
I'm with you.
after Moses' time.
Yeah.
It was not Moses' time.
Okay.
Like Moses, some people. No, we know. Moses had his own language. I'm telling you, Moses had his own language, which they differ. Even because we remember now, who was the ruler over Moses? Pharaoh. But we know that if you go to Egypt, there is not any proofs, because the Egyptians, they used to write down the historical events. There is not any proofs that something happened between them and someone called Moses.
Okay.
But we know, as European, the archaeologists, there was a gap in history. No one really knows about it in Egypt, that there was people ruling Egypt. Okay. But however, we can, as a Muslim, go back to someone called Tabari. Tabari was one of the earliest historians in Islam.
Yeah.
He was around 1,000 years ago. He mentioned that
on the pyramids, on the face side of one of the pyramids, is a formula for a turbocharger that's way advanced to any system we've ever got now. So where did that come from, and how do you age that? It's 1,000 years is nothing when you think how many times, you know, the solar system, what size we are. 1,000 years is nothing because it wasn't registered, written, documented. So today you can Google it on the side of the Great Pyramids that comes before many religions were written.
I don't know about that.
It says there's a turbocharger. It's
I know. I've heard about this. Even I heard about the charger in Sumerians, that they found like a battery. Sumerians.
But it's written on the side of the pyramid.
But my point, sorry, my point here is that Tabari mentioned that those who ruled ruled over Moses were called the Amalekites, the Amalekites. And the Amalekites, we know that they were Arabs, from the ancient Arabs, who came from the Arab Peninsula.
They were part of the 12 tribes of Israel.
No, not the Amalekites, no. The Amalekites were not. Amalekites, no. Because in the Bible, he mentioned that the Israelites were ordered to kill Amalekites.
They did fight when they were cousins. They were still part of the 12
cousins. The Jewish, the Israelites and the Ishmaelites are cousins.
You know we're all related.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, the human race, we're all one.
Without any doubt. We go back to Adam. We go back to Adam, trust me.
Not Adam and Steve.
Yeah, Adam and Eve,
Well, what's wrong with Adam and Steve?
No. What's right with Adam and Steve?
What's wrong?
Well, if it was Adam and Steve, we'd have never had a human race. We'd have never had a human race.
We carry you another time.
I appreciate that. I think we've built good foundations.
Yeah, no problem, inshallah. Take care, man.
Peace be with you.